Chris, Liege Games. I like abstracts. No secret there. I shout it at the rooftops every time I see an abstract that I like on Kickstarter, and so you're guaranteed to hear my thoughts on that. But what are my favorites? What are the abstracts that you should know that, really get me thinking and really loving them from that standpoint? Let's talk about my top 5 favorite abstracts. Now, I haven't played every abstract out there. There are plenty of abstracts that I want to play. If you're not familiar with what an abstract is, it takes the theme completely out of it. A lot of abstracts also revolve around the concept of having as much information as possible on the board. Not necessarily perfect information, but heading in that direction. And so sometimes, especially if you're a luck guy like me, where you enjoy the chance of rolling dice and seeing what happens, these types of games are definitely not for you. However, there are ones that just seem to tickle the brain in the right way and not like a mind flayer reaching his little, you know. So, which are the ones that I like that I would recommend? What are my top 5? Let's talk. So, you know me, I like a game of show and not tell. And since I like showing you, let's talk about it. Let's pull up the pages here so you can see those. So this is number 5 for me. This is a relatively lower ranked abstract game. This is Push Fight. It is exactly what it sounds, what it looks like on the picture here. Now, the problem with this game, I think, overall, is just the availability. It's not widely available. It's not even readily available now. There is one guy who made Push Fight. Company is Bretco. There was actually a sponsorship several years ago by the webcomic Penny Arcade, and they put a special edition Penny Arcade version out. And there were some licensing issues, some issues there. So I don't know exactly what happened, but it became basically impossible to get from the Penny Arcade side of things. But it got their endorsement as a board game that they really enjoyed, and so you can imagine what that did to the popularity at the time. But the concept is relatively simple. You have your 2 colors, you have this very small board, as you can see. This is not a complicated game. It's not like push this piece off, it's push that piece off. No, it's push a single piece off. So what are you doing? You're just moving, sliding 2 of your pieces orthogonally, and then you are pushing with one of your big pushers here. And then the one that is pushed, you put this red one on top of it, meaning it cannot be pushed back by your opponent next round. And you go back and forth on this very limited board until one is pushed off. That's it. That's the nice thing about these abstract games, is that there's not a lot of overhead rules. You can explain the rules to most of these games within a matter of a few minutes at very most. They're portable, they're just nice to have overall. But this one, because it's more limited, it's a little bit higher price point than some of the others. But the simplicity that's there, and just the sliding around, it's fast, it's quick, it's easy. I really, really like it. But this one especially is not for everybody. My wife does not like this one. So it's not the one that hits the table the most by any means. So that is Push Fight at number 5. Number 4. You may have heard of this one, you may not have heard of this one. This is Kamisado. Now again, you can see that it is not very complicated. It looks like a rainbow version of chess, if you will. This is much more perfect information. This is much more strategic than Push Fight. Push Fight is very tactical. This is much more strategic because you can start to predict pieces and where they go once you know the rules. The rules are relatively simple. You see each of the castles. You can move them as far as you want. The object is to get one of your pieces completely on the other end of the board. That's it. But, here's the caveat, you can only move the color of the piece. As you can see, these are all different colored: orange, red, green, purple, yellow, blue. They all have their individual colors. You can only move the one of the space where your opponent's last piece stopped. So if you slide one forward and it ends on a red square, the opponent has to move their red one. Now again, they can move in the 3 directions as far or as short as they want, but you are essentially predicting part of their next move. And so that is where the strategy comes in. Now there are variations of this game. I've been trying to get my hands on a copy of Kamisado Max, for several years. Now, Max just makes the board a little bit wider. Instead of an 8x8, it's a 10x10. And now they've added silver and gold as well, which allow for diagonals off the board to appear on the other side, and a little bit of teleportation from one spot to the next. So just adding a little bit of a mix. You do not need to use those, but just adding an additional layer on it. But this is incredibly hard to find. Nobody seems to want to part with it. I literally spent probably hours texting everyone who had a copy, not even the people who had marked it for trade, but like pretty much everyone on Board Game Geek a couple years ago that even had it, and no one was willing to give it up. So it's not very widely known and thought of, but I really enjoy it. Also, there is a pocket edition, and the pocket edition, I think it cost me $15 plus shipping from Europe, so like $22 overall, and we can take it with us if we go to a restaurant. And so it's beautiful. It's well made. The only thing I wish is that we had a cloth board so that we could fold it up, because the board, even though it's only probably 6 inches by 6 inches, it'd be nice because you could fold it then. But as you can see, it's a very elegant game. It's a lot more akin to chess, but in a different way, where you're telling your opponent which piece they're going to have to use, and thus having to plan accordingly on your own piece. So that is number 4. That is Kamisado. Number 3. You may have heard of the top 3. There's a reason that these games are so well thought of. This is from the GIPF, GIPF series by Chris Byrne. He has done a wonderful, wonderful series in the abstract community. He has probably put out 5, 6 of the top 10, 20 games overall, depending on how you actually want to rank them, depending on the day. This is my personal favorite, YINSH. You can see it's very simple. You've got sort of your Othello-like pieces with black sides and white sides, and you've got 5 rings. Move rings over pieces, pieces flip, no matter what side is down. Wherever your ring starts, you put a piece there, and then you move it. And there are limitations on how you can move it. The goal is to have 5 of these pieces of your color in a row, which then allows you to take off one of your rings. Now, I say allows you. What I'm actually meaning is that you can see in the corner here that there are spaces for 3 of these rings. So the first one to get 3 of their rings off wins. So you want to be the first one that gets 5 in a row. Now you have more rings than just 3. So what happens is you have less choices of the rings you can move as you get ahead. So there is an automatic catch-up mechanic so that there's not become a runaway leader. I am not good at this game. I lose almost probably 75% of this game that I play, but I love it. It makes my brain work in a different way. The other one that's out there, the comparative one, Tzaar, Tzaar, is another one that is very highly thought of. It would probably be on this list, but I haven't actually played it. I'm sorry. Don't burn me at the stake. But it's one of my favorite. So you're going, Chris, what's higher than YINSH? Now, this number 2 you also may not have heard of, but I'm going to go with it because I really enjoy it. It was gifted to me on the Pay It Forward thread, and that is Tintas. Now, this comes for a game you may never heard of. It's actually the 97th ranked abstract game. So again, much higher than 1 or 2 others on this list. Now, you can see, again, I am a big fan of the rainbow theme. Again, as a very high quality components. And that's one commonality I see in the abstracts as well. It's from a European publisher, Clemens Gerhard. The concept, again, is relatively simple. And I like this one because I can teach this one to my kids. I can teach this to my nieces and my nephews. I can teach it to almost anyone, and you can grasp it almost immediately. You start with this little pawn, this marker. You replace one of these on the board, and then you get to go in any orthogonal direction that you can and take colors until you cannot take the same color. So you could take these 2 yellows because they're orthogonal, and then you could take the 2 blues, the next person, but then you might be stuck taking just this 1 orange, 2 oranges. And so you can gradually accumulate those colors. And the win conditions are simple. It's a little bit of push your luck in a different way because there are 7 colors. You need the majority of the majority, or you need all of one. Now, what do I mean by that? Having the majority of those 4. So you need 4 colors having 4 of the 7 tokens, or you need just all of one single color. There's a few other tiny rules, but nothing hard. And so the question in this game becomes, do you just go from the beginning to get 4 of 4? Or do you really focus and clamp down on 1 or 2 colors? Because if you get one color completely, even if the other person gets 4 of 4, or even 5 different colors in the majority, or 6 colors of majority, it doesn't matter, because you getting that one sole complete color wins. So this game makes you play until the very end. You can win at the very end, even with the other person showing an overwhelming victory by strategically outplaying them. And that is why I like it as well. That is why it is number 2. Now, what's number 1? I'm cheating. 1A and 1B. 1B is Tak, the beautiful game. If you're not familiar with Tak, I put a video review out of this as one of my very earliest videos on the channel. Tak was developed for the Patrick Rothfuss fantasy series to be based off of the game that is played in that series itself. James Ernest took a description by Patrick Rothfuss and created this wonderfully thoughtful, deep, but straightforward to play abstract game. It was funded on Kickstarter, and it has continued to have a significant retail presence. The concept, 2 colors and a 5x5 grid. All you have to do is have a line, doesn't have to even be straight, connecting 2 opposite sides. Doesn't matter which 2 opposite sides. That's it. Now the tricky part is you can stack your pieces on other people's pieces, but you cannot directly place them on other people's pieces. So you have to take one that is adjacent and stack it on top of the pile next to it. Or take that pile or even part of that pile and move it orthogonally next door. So it opens up the possibilities of how to manipulate those piles in order to get across the board. It is an elegant, simplistic, fantastic game, and it has created more, man, I can't believe I completely missed that moments, in a very good way, because then you just clear it and start again, because games take minutes, and it's fun. I have the most fun with this game. That's why it's 1B. 1A, it's not necessarily as fun, but it's Hive. Hive, Hive, Hive. I did not understand the hype. I had heard all about it, and I finally picked up a copy. I ended up trading for a copy of the Pocket version, which comes with 2 of the small expansions already included. I cannot give this game a high enough recommendation. Either of these top 2 games, to be fair, but this one especially, if this strikes your fancy at all. The other nice thing I have not mentioned up at this point is that, like I said, the abstract games, you can read through the rules, you can get an understanding, you can even watch a gameplay probably in less time than this whole video is and find out whether or not each one of these is for you. That is what I love about the abstracts as well. Hive is simple. Surround the other person's queen bee. That's it. Each of the insects has their own power of how they can maneuver or move on the stack. And I say stack, but what I really mean is adjacency, as you can see here just on the picture. And you can only move it if it's freely manipulable. So these ones in the center that you cannot move without knocking out of the way of other insects, you can't move those. But that is where the creativity and the thinking outside of the box comes in. There are dedicated manuals and strategy of how to play this game. It's that highly thought of. Competitive scene of Hive, right there. That should tell you something. This is essentially what you're trying to do. It's a lot easier said than done sometimes. And it seems like each time I play it, I have learned some little trick or nuance that is different. Because this is also a game I feel like is not as short as it could be. Because this game could easily take you 20 or 30 minutes depending on how good you are at stalling or delaying the end game, even to the point of turning the game around into your advantage. That is the beauty of it as well. So there you go. I'm sorry I cheated. 6 instead of 5, but I had to. Too good not to include them. So those are my thoughts. There are plenty of other great ones out there, but those are my favorites. The ones that if you pull them out, I will absolutely play them with you. What do you think? Have you played any of these? Have you played all of these? Have you played none of these? Are you interested? The other benefit that I didn't even mention is, unlike Push Fight, most of the others of these are relatively much more easier to get as well as the price point being very good. So that's the other nice thing about abstract games. Or they're much easier to trade for because someone always ends up picking one up that they don't like. So there you go. My favorite abstracts. Thanks for watching. Stay classy.